So I think everybody in the world has heard the story by now, but it was Thursday night, I believe it was. I believe it was the Knicks game on Thursday. A video surfaces of LeBron confronting ESPN personality Stephen A. Smith. Now, we normally don't like to talk about other networks, but this became a thing. Stephen A. Smith, I don't know, I wouldn't say he was forced to address it. I think he chose to address it, but he did address it on First Take on Friday. Here is what Stephen A. Smith had to say about his confrontation with LeBron James.
That wasn't a basketball player confronting me. That was a parent. That was a father. And I can't sit here and be angry or feel slighted by LeBron James in any way in that regard. By all accounts, he's obviously a wonderful family man and a wonderful father who cares very, very deeply about his son. And based on some of the comments that he had heard, or shall I say, I think he thought he heard, he clearly took exception to some of the things that he heard me say, and he confronted me about it.
That was Stephen A. Smith. It was certainly a much longer response, but I had Mary and producer Bree cut it because he went on for about 2.5 minutes. But I'll be quick here, J-Mart, and I will start by prefacing what we preface this conversation with every single time that we do it. We're not criticizing LeBron James, the father. We're not criticizing LeBron James, the family man. We are not criticizing Bronny James, the person or young adult. But at the same time, I will also say this. We saw LeBron seemingly come out of nowhere to go after our colleague Doug Gottlieb over something he said months ago. We saw LeBron leave social media for a little while. He's obviously back at the height of the Bronny criticism. Now we see this. One, I have zero problem with anything that anyone has said about Bronny because I have yet to hear anyone criticize anything other than the on-the-court production in which Bronny clearly is not one of the 450 best basketball players in the world and should not be on the floor. I have yet to hear anybody criticize anything for other than that. I will defend Stephen A. unless some new audio comes out where he says something other than that. But I'll tell you what, J-Mart, I stand with Stephen A. I think LeBron is starting to crack. I think he realizes this whole thing was a mistake, that he put undue pressure on his son, that he put an undue spotlight on his son. I don't know if he's regretting it, but I think he's starting to crack a little bit.
Yeah, so the problem here is that LeBron's the reason that his son is being criticized. LeBron is the reason why his son is being talked about at all. And LeBron knows that he's that reason. And I think the thing you were saying there at the end is very likely true. There might be some guilt. There may be some remorse. There may at least just be, man, I've put a mountain of bricks on my own son's back. But, yeah, I mean, I don't know how many times we always caveat and talk about Bronny's supposedly a wonderful guy and he works hard and all this other kind of stuff. But he didn't deserve to go to the NBA. He just didn't. Don't tell me, and I've seen this a number of different times, people will defend Bronny by talking about his G League. I don't care. I don't care what his G League stats are. Stephen A. Smith is paid to have opinions and to spout those opinions, often at a high decibel level.
No doubt.
About things that are happening in sports. And he knows, first and foremost, he's an entertainer more than an informer. A lot of what he says, I don't even think he believes, but it doesn't matter. I mean, we've been in this business long enough to see that that's how it's done by a lot of people, a lot of folks. But LeBron James going up to Stephen A. Smith and saying what he said as a father, unfortunately, you can't really have sympathy for this because it's not as if Stephen A. was doing anything other than criticizing the basketball of Bronny James. And look, he is now an athlete. He's a professional paid athlete, is Bronny James. And so he is fair game just like anybody else. And Bronny's game is going to generate this. Bronny, anytime that we're talking about Bronny, it's probably not going to be for a positive reason as it relates to now because there's not really anything you could say about what he's doing in the G League that's going to be particularly interesting. It's going to be something about why was he playing minutes for the LA Lakers on a random Monday night like a month ago or whatever else. Like, he has put his son in this position, And now his son is a public figure that is going to take criticism from people in the sports media industry who are supposed to criticize and analyze what they see. Even if it is sad, and he's like, hey, man, don't talk about my son. It's like, all right, dude, like, you can't have it this way.
Yep.
You can control. Apparently, you have enough power to control whether or not your son plays in the NBA before he's ready. But what you don't have control over is what people say as a result of that. The results, the consequences for that, that's the way it is. We live in a country where your power, your leverage, your just stardom in the NBA, and all that you have done carried enough weight that you brought your son there before he was ready, and now people are criticizing that. And now you're trying to that same power, that same leverage. I mean, you go to Stephen A. Smith, who is known mainly for his NBA stuff, at least early in his career, and that's probably where he's buttered his bread the most. You go to him, maybe if you shut him down, you shut everybody down. Maybe that's the idea. I'm going to go after the biggest dog in the yard and create space. But honestly, I would say behind closed doors, when he's not on camera saying, I can't blame LeBron James for this, he's probably smiling ear to ear. Because you gave him everything. This isn't a bad look for Stephen A. Smith. This is a bad look for LeBron James because it looks soft. It's like, hey, he's not ready to be here, but you do not talk about him. You do not criticize him. You don't mention that he shouldn't be here. You don't do any of these things. It's like, who are you trying? What are you covering up here? Like, what exactly is happening? We all understand this. I understand, I think, what LeBron James is doing, and I wouldn't want anybody to say anything about my kids either. But, dude, that's what goes with the territory. I mean, people are going to talk about you no matter what, but, I mean, every pro athlete, their parents probably hate seeing some of the things that are said about their kids. Unfortunately for you, you still play in the same league with your son, but you're seeing the same thing, and maybe you are reacting like a father, but I think ultimately, underneath, that the slings and arrows that he is taking right now are because of you, not because of him. And because you love your son that much, that is what might be causing, as you said, the cracks to form. Because that's the last thing I think that he wanted. I can't believe that he did not see this coming long before that draft. Well, but somehow we are here.
Well, and the only thing I would really add to that is the only reason I don't think he could see this coming was because he convinced the media that this wasn't a bad thing before the draft. I mean, I go back to, ironically, I mean, I vividly remember, first of all, if you remember Jay Martin, you might not, but I just remember this, is like they had the second round separate from the first round for the first time ever. And they had the second round at like 1 in the afternoon.
It was in the afternoon.
Yeah. But I remember having it on to, I want to see, is Bronny really going to go with that last pick by the Lakers late in the second round? It wasn't the last pick, but whatever it was, 56, 57. I tuned it in to see. And the second the pick was made, ironically enough, Stephen A. was on set, and him and Woj, who I know Woj is no longer in the business, and I hope he's having a fun time in college basketball, but him and Woj went on this monologue of, don't you even dare call this nepotism. There's nepotism all over this league, and if you're not mad about this GM getting a job because his dad played and this coach getting a job because his dad played, and it's like immediately it was almost like the media telling, it's like anything else with the media. It's like the media is trying to tell us how we should feel, and I guess, I don't know, because I vividly remember that, and I guess LeBron just felt like, because him and his cronies, Rich Paul and everybody, were able to convince the media on draft night that Bronny was immune to criticism, that meant that went on in perpetuity for his NBA career. I don't know, but that would be the last thing I would say to put a button on this conversation, is just like, he did a good job of controlling the media or convincing the media that Bronny was ready. And again, we understand that Bronny had the cardiac arrest, all that, but Bronny also played from December on for USC. It wasn't as though he played probably 60 to 70% of their games, and it wasn't as though at any point during that season he looked like a guy that should be one of the 59, 60 players drafted in that NBA draft. So that's the only thing I could think of. He clearly controlled the narrative around draft time, and now I think, listen, the cat's out of the bag. You can't control the narrative anymore. People can see it with their own eyes. And again, from my perspective, I have no problem with what Stephen A. Smith has said, because it's what everybody's seeing, and as you said, it's his job, like it is all of our jobs, to just commentate and talk about sports.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. I mean, I think that at some point, the lie is going to be exposed. At some point, the I'm pushing him too far, too fast is going to be exposed, because the problem for LeBron is you can only control the narrative until he goes out on the floor and he is what he is. Yep. He's not a marionette, right? Like, you can't control him that way to make him as good as you are. As bad as you want him to be, as bad as maybe he wants him to be. But the problem was we were going to see him play, and there were going to be reports that were just objective about what people were seeing and how he was playing, and we were going to realize the jig is up. Like, eventually, we're going to see the thing that's real. And the whole Fantasyland thing, it's not a movie, man. It's not a movie. It's not one of the things that you're doing at your production studio, LeBron. Like, he has to go out and play basketball. And the problem is, he's not NBA level at that. And so that's going to be a nonstop critique. That's going to be a nonstop thing that we see every time. And unfortunately for Bronny, I mean, it got to that point where he hit a bucket and there was like people like, like all excited because he hit a three or something like that. That's not what you want, man. And I'm sure that's not what LeBron wants. It's not what Bronny wants either, but that's awful. That's like pity, almost mockery. And that's a bad look for Bronny to go through. And I do feel bad for LeBron, but in the same moment, I almost take it back, because this could have been easily avoided if you had talked to anyone and listened to them. Mm-hmm. Because I can't imagine anybody but the most just bogus yes men not telling you this is not as good an idea as you think it is. Let's hold off.
Totally agree. Nothing else to add. We wish Bronny well, but we also have to be realistic and be fair in our coverage. And so far, Bronny has not looked like an NBA player.